Martin Scorsese's Raging Bull is considered a masterpiece by many, and an enigma by others. What's to like about a film that is a black and white tragedy with extremely unlikable characters? Too many people go into this movie thinking that they're going to get something different. We have all the Rocky comparisons to thank for that. While Rocky has its merits as a great underdog story, Raging Bull is much more oriented at exploring the darker elements of masculinity and human psychology. I think one of the reasons why Raging Bull is so celebrated is because it's one of the most honest portrayals of what it means to be a man ever committed to film. I'll try to explain Martin Scorsese's postmodern cinematic style and how he used it to capture a perfect depiction of a savage. Jake LaMotta is portrayed by Robert De Niro as a primitive beast. His self-destructive violence, abusive language, and aggressive antics paint him as a rabid animal. The decline and fall of Jake LaMotta provides a pretext for the playing out of a number of anxieties about the irrecoverability of the past. His collapse into impotence plays out a scenario which evokes profound loss. Loss of a great classic cinema, of community values, of family life, of a sense of individuality. A tragic scenario in which the hero's suffering teaches us something about our own life, and how to accept its terms. One of the reasons why De Niro's performance is so compelling is because of LaMotta's short temper. We never know when he's going to explode in a fit of rage. LaMotta's violence is a direct result of his insecurity. The constant need to prove himself to others impedes on the quality of his life on a daily basis. It's interesting that feminist film critics have pointed out that they think Raging Bull is an explicit statement of a radical critique of masculinity and the inherent violence that surrounds it. I personally disagree because I think that the film's stance on violence is ambiguous. At the very least, I could agree that in a sense, Raging Bull puts masculinity on trial by putting it under the microscope to look for any flaws it might have. What would our society look like if everybody behaved like Jake LaMotta did? Perhaps not so good, but if the film were merely a story about the average man, it wouldn't be nearly as captivating. The reason why the film isn't picking a side when it comes to feminism's objection to masculinity is because it's simply a portrait of a horrible person, solely for the means of inner exploration. It's honest enough to say, this is what bad men are like, but it's not saying, all or most men are like this. Jake LaMotta is so bad that he alienates even other hyper-masculine figures throughout the movie. Joey LaMotta, who isn't exactly a paragon of moral values, rejects Jake for his nature. In the fight with Gennaro, he purposely does extra serious damage to his opponent's face because his wife finds him attractive. Frank Vincent's character screws up by just talking to her. Nobody is safe around this guy. In one of the best edited scenes in cinema history, LaMotta atones for his sins the only way he knows how, through sacrificial violence. Scorsese's religious imagery is apparent when Jake lays back on the ropes, similar to Christ's crucifixion. While estranged from his family due to his violent actions, LaMotta loses the title fight to Sugar Ray Robinson. Letting us know that he hasn't hit rock bottom, Jake reminds his opponent, "You never got me down, Ray." A big theme in Raging Bull is the perception of self, and how it diverges from how others see you. This is ultimately made clear in the final scene when De Niro performs the famous "On the Waterfront" Marlon Brando monologue. After gaining 60 pounds and becoming a hack comedian, Jake LaMotta never redeems himself in the eyes of the audience, but he redeems himself in his own view. The unfortunate downfall of his inflated egotistical legacy is almost not apparent to himself, because he views himself as a victim, just like he always has. He sees himself as a tortured man, a classic victim complex. Instead of taking actions for his responsibility for his erratic behavior, he defends and justifies them. Even when he gets arrested, he pounds the jail cell in some of the best acting I've ever seen, screaming, why? Maybe because you introduced underage girls to sleazeballs in your club, you fucking pervert? What do you mean, why? This is a strong display of the cynicism that is only capable of those with the highest amount of arrogance. This is a story of a man who refuses to feel guilt, regardless of the circumstances. How do we as an audience even attempt to connect with such an utter pile of shit for a main character? To tell you the truth, it's difficult for a lot of people. Initial reception was very polarizing, and it took until the 1990s before it was truly recognized for its greatness. Variety's original review in 1980 called Jake LaMotta one of the most repugnant and unlikable screen protagonists in some time. If we can't connect with him through sympathy or empathy, I think we can use Jake LaMotta as a cautionary tale. I think that all of us are capable of malevolence, and most of us should be thankful that our instinctual drives since birth have not led us on this toxic and disastrous path that he was on. And if perhaps our nature is more results of the actions we choose, we should credit ourselves. Raging Bull is a prime example of unchecked jealousy and how it can lead to our own failings. LaMotta may be irredeemably flawed, and Raging Bull's honesty about human disposition makes it distinctive, especially when compared to other films of its time. LaMotta's brother Joey, played by Joe Pesci, is another great performance. Joey is not perfect or moral, but in a sense he is the Abel to Jake's Cain. He is the one looking out for Jake, even though he is not safe from the lashing out of his brother. Through this relationship, it is revealed that Jake wants to be punished for his misdeeds. He latches on to simple throwaway phrases that Joey makes and takes them out of context just to victimize his brother. Jake constantly conjures up imaginary lovers he has to compete against for the affection of his wife. When he begins to suspect his own brother, that's when all hell breaks loose. The famous scene between the two at the beginning of the film has Jake telling Joey, "Hit me." By the end of the film and after his fall from grace, he tells Joey, "Kiss me." The expression of such strong emotions in this film leave me exhausted, but in a good way. Raging Bull is a brilliant showcase of acting, a springboard for discussion about pathology, an example of virtuoso filmmaking all rolled into one operatic tragedy. It may not be the experience for those looking for sheer escapism. However, those willing to peer into the conflicts of the human condition can be enlightened by observing such a menacing figure. It's important to note that Scorsese only decided to do this movie after almost losing his life in a drug overdose. By his own account, doing the film saved his life. Maybe he found solace in the story of the disturbed man who was only respected in the ring, and perhaps you can too. Raging Bull is simply one of the most enthralling character studies ever attempted.